Daniel Cormier, a two-division UFC champion, one of the greatest fighters who ever lived, just looked into a camera and said he was disgusted. Not annoyed. Not disappointed. Disgusted. That's a strong word. And the man he directed it at? Josh Hokit. A fighter most people barely knew existed 2 weeks ago. How did we get here? How did a Contender Series fighter with no UFC contract manage to get under the skin of one of the most respected men in the entire sport? And on the other side of the MMA world, Arman Tsarukyan, the man knocking on the door of lightweight greatness, just fired back at Israel Adesanya in a way that turned heads and raised temperatures. Two stories. Both explosive. Both deeply human. And both telling you something important about what this sport really looks like when the cameras catch the raw, unfiltered moments. Let's get into it.
Let's start with Daniel Cormier and Josh Hokit, because this situation has now fully escalated into something that nobody predicted when it first began. Go back to the beginning. Josh Hokit appeared on Dana White's Contender Series. He competed. He did what he was supposed to do inside the cage. But when the night ended, Dana White didn't offer him a contract. And instead of walking away quietly, instead of going back to the regional circuit and letting his fighting do the talking, Hokit went public. He expressed his frustration loudly and openly, and then when Daniel Cormier weighed in with his perspective, Hokit turned his fire directly at DC. Now here's the thing about picking a public fight with Daniel Cormier. Most fighters, even experienced ones, would think twice. Because Cormier is not just a former champion. He is a man who carries enormous credibility across every layer of the sport. Fighters respect him. Fans respect him. Media respects him. He was an Olympic-level wrestler before he ever set foot in the UFC. He beat the best heavyweights and light heavyweights the sport had to offer. And after his career, he built a second legacy as one of the most thoughtful, knowledgeable voices in MMA broadcasting. When DC talks about the sport, people don't just hear an opinion. They hear lived experience. They hear someone who actually walked the path. So when Hokit went after him, people were already skeptical. But then Cormier responded, and the word he used was the one that changed everything. Disgusted. DC said he was disgusted by Hokit's behavior. And he meant it. You could feel it. This wasn't a practiced media soundbite. This was a man who genuinely felt that a line had been crossed, and he wasn't willing to pretend otherwise. So, what exactly disgusted him? It was the combination of things. It wasn't just that Hokit complained. Fighters complain, that's human. It wasn't just that he felt overlooked. Almost every fighter on that roster has felt overlooked at some point. What got to Cormier was the way Hokit handled it. The public venting. The blame shifting. And then, when someone with legitimate experience tried to offer perspective, turning around and going after that person too. In Cormier's world, in the world he came up through, that kind of behavior is a red flag. Not just professionally, but personally. Because the fighters who make it, the ones who build real careers, are not the ones who explode every time things don't go their way. They're the ones who absorb the setback, recalibrate, and come back hungrier. Quieter. More dangerous. Cormier has seen both kinds of fighters. Up close. For his entire career. And in his eyes, Hokit was showing him exactly the kind of mindset that doesn't make it to the top. But here's where the story gets more complicated. Because not everyone agrees with DC's reaction. There are people, fighters included, who look at this situation and see something different. They see a young man who worked incredibly hard, got one big shot, didn't get the outcome he wanted, and then got publicly criticized by the president of the company on a massive platform. And when he pushed back, he got piled on by the media establishment too. From that angle, Hokit isn't the villain. He's just someone who broke under the pressure of an unfair system and said too much at the wrong time. And the people criticizing him are all people who already have their spot secured. People who don't have to worry about whether their next fight gets them noticed or their career evaporates. That tension between the establishment perspective and the outsider perspective is what makes this story so much more than just a social media beef between a broadcaster and an unsigned fighter. Because it's really a story about what we expect from fighters. We ask these men and women to go into a cage and fight. We ask them to sacrifice their bodies and their health and their time and their relationships in pursuit of something most of them will never fully reach. And then when the dream doesn't materialize the way they hoped, we tell them to be quiet about it, to be professional, to smile and move on. And sometimes that advice is genuinely good advice. Sometimes the professional response really is the smart one. But sometimes, just sometimes, the frustration is real and it's valid and it deserves to be heard, even if the way it's expressed isn't perfect. Daniel Cormier doesn't see it that way in this case. He was disgusted by what he saw. And he said so, loudly and clearly, because that's who DC is. He doesn't hide his opinions. He doesn't sugarcoat. He gives you exactly what he thinks. And now Josh Hokit is in a position where two of the most powerful and respected figures in the sport have publicly questioned not just his talent, but his character. That's a hole that is very hard to climb out of. Whether he climbs out of it, whether he goes back to fighting and lets the results speak for him, is the only real path forward. But right now, in this moment, he is losing this battle in every possible way. And Daniel Cormier made sure the whole world knew it. Now let's shift gears completely, because on the other side of the MMA universe, something very different is brewing. Something that has the lightweight division buzzing and Israel Adesanya's name trending in a division he doesn't even compete in. Arman Tsarukyan. If you've been sleeping on this man, wake up.
Right now.
Because Tsarukyan is one of the most exciting and dangerous fighters in the entire UFC, and he is on a warpath toward the lightweight championship that feels more inevitable with every passing month. Here's his story in brief. Tsarukyan came into the UFC, and in his very first fight, he faced Khabib Nurmagomedov's longtime training partner and gave him one of the hardest nights of his career. From a debut, against someone with that pedigree, that alone told you something different was here. Since then, he has won fight after fight, sharpened every tool in his arsenal, and built himself into a genuine title contender who almost nobody wants to face. He's aggressive. He's relentless. His wrestling is elite, his striking has improved dramatically, and perhaps most importantly, he is the kind of engine that never stops. The kind of cardio and pressure that breaks fighters in the later rounds when their body starts making deals their mind won't agree to. Tsarukyan is the kind of fighter that keeps champions up at night. So when Israel Adesanya, the former middleweight champion, one of the most gifted strikers in UFC history, and one of the sport's biggest personalities, made some remarks about Tsarukyan, people paid attention. Because Izzy doesn't just talk to talk. He's calculated with his words. He's theatrical, yes, but underneath the showmanship there's always a point being made. What Adesanya said touched on Tsarukyan's position in the lightweight division, on his path, his style, or his readiness, in a way that Tsarukyan clearly felt was dismissive, or disrespectful, or simply wrong. And Tsarukyan fired back. Now, this is important. The way Tsarukyan fired back matters. Because he didn't just throw a casual social media jab. He was direct, he was pointed, and there was an edge to it that felt personal. He essentially told Adesanya to worry about his own division, his own career, his own problems, and to stay in his lane. That last part carries weight, because Adesanya's own career has hit some turbulence recently. After his long and dominant run as middleweight champion, the losses came. The defeats to Sean Strickland and then to Dricus du Plessis shook the narrative around Izzy. The man who once seemed untouchable suddenly looked human. More than human, he looked like a fighter whose window might be closing. So when Adesanya starts commenting on other divisions and other fighters, there's an argument to be made that Tsarukyan's response was not just defensiveness, it was a mirror. He was essentially saying, look at where you are before you comment on where I'm going. And that's a brutal thing to say. But it's not unfair. What makes this exchange so fascinating is the contrast between the two men. Adesanya is the established star, the name everyone knows, the fighter who crossed over into mainstream consciousness and became bigger than the sport in some ways. He is creative and expressive and genuinely one of a kind inside the octagon. Tsarukyan is the grinder, the relentless machine, the fighter who doesn't do much for style points, but who makes everyone he fights look exhausted and desperate by the end. There's no flash. There's no theatrical entrance or poetic post-fight speech. There's just the work. Relentless, suffocating, beautifully brutal work. These two men exist on almost opposite ends of the fighter personality spectrum. And so when Izzy says something about Tsarukyan and Tsarukyan fires back, it isn't just two guys trading words on the internet. It's a collision of philosophies, of styles, of what people believe the sport is supposed to celebrate. And here's what this exchange really signals. Tsarukyan is not going to be quiet about his place in the sport. He is not going to be humble in the way that some fighters perform humility while privately seething. He is going to say what he thinks, challenge who he wants to challenge, and let the cage handle the rest. That's a dangerous combination. Talent plus confidence plus a chip on the shoulder that never seems to fully go away. The lightweight division is the most historically rich division in the sport. Khabib ruled it. Conor made it famous. Charles Oliveira made it dramatic. Islam Makhachev currently sits on top of it like an unmovable force. And waiting, pushing, fighting his way toward that throne is Arman Tsarukyan. And now he's not just focused on the lightweight ladder. He's apparently watching what other champions say about him. And he's willing to respond. That matters. Not because a social media exchange changes anything about the rankings or the matchmaking, but because it reveals something about who Tsarukyan is becoming. Not just a fighter, not just a contender, a presence, a personality, a man who understands that in this sport, the story you carry into the cage matters almost as much as what you do once you're in it. Two stories, two very different worlds within the same sport. But pull back far enough and the common thread appears again. Reputation. And how you protect it. Daniel Cormier built his reputation over decades of excellence in wrestling, in the cage, in the broadcast booth. It is one of the most sterling reputations in the history of this sport. And when he felt that something threatened the values that reputation is built on, hard work, professionalism, humility in the face of setbacks, he pushed back. Hard. Because reputation, once you've built it to that level, becomes something worth defending. Josh Hokit has no reputation yet. He's trying to build one. And right now, the story being told about him is not the one he wanted. The reputation forming around his name is not fighter, not contender. It's complainer. It's someone who couldn't handle the hard moment with grace. Whether that reputation is fully deserved is a separate conversation. But it is the conversation happening right now. And Arman Tsarukyan, he is in the middle of building his. Fight by fight, word by word, response by response. He is writing the story of who he is in this sport. And when Adesanya said something that didn't fit that story, Tsarukyan didn't ignore it. He grabbed the pen back. Because that's the thing about reputation in combat sports. You can never fully control it. Other people will talk. Other people will define you if you let them. The only antidote is to keep showing up in the cage, in the interviews, in the moments when it would be easier to stay silent. Keep showing up and keep being exactly who you are. Cormier did that for his entire career. And he's still doing it. Tsarukyan is doing it now. Loudly, clearly, without apology. And Josh Hokit, somewhere between the noise and the frustration and the very public battle he's been fighting, has a choice about who he wants to be from here. The cage is always waiting. And it never lies.